Hello and welcome to the Navy Blue Corner. I'm Ian, and it's been a rather deflating week after a demoralising loss to Sydney and the beginnings of a new yet oh so familiar injury crisis. Joining me to dissect it all, as well as building up and previewing our almost must-win clash, it feels like at this stage, against the Gold Coast Suns, is of course my good mate Lockie. Mate, how are you going and how's the mood after another very frustrating week?
I'm very much in need of our weekly therapy, mate. So I'm glad that this time has come. Plenty to dissect.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to know if your opinions and mood differ at all, knowing that you are
We shall
kind of
see.
away from the footy bubble, in a sense, being away in London right
Mm-hmm.
now. I'm very keen to get all your thoughts
I'm
in this, but
excited.
let's jump straight into Navy noise and let's talk a little bit about the game
Let's do
last
it.
week against Sydney and what were your kind of key takeaways from the loss, Lockie?
Well, I mean, it was such a strange game. A bit of deja vu, I guess, from the previous week. But, like, I don't know about you, but I was so up and about in that first quarter. Even when Sydney kind of pegged it back a little bit to make it a bit more respectable by quarter time, I just felt like we were so on top. And I genuinely just did not see the game going in that direction from there.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't feeling super confident early on. I know he did play quite
Okay.
well to start, got the score on the scoreboard, which was beautiful, and then it all sort of fell apart. There was just a little bit of slingshottiness to it early, which worried me. But I mean, as soon as Sydney
Mm-hmm.
adjusted, we just weren't able to go. And I think my big key takeaway was just that it was the same problems that we've seen, that we've spoken about for a long time. And any stage, it seems as if we're evolving and starting to overcome these, they just keep rearing their head. I mean, there was a lack of movement and speed off the contest as soon as a Walsh or a Chera isn't there.
Yep.
When teams stifle our ball movement and flood the space, we struggle to move the ball. We're starting to be slow and it's long down the line. We don't take the game on. When the pressure
Mm-hmm.
builds on us, we fumble. It was just basics that really let us down on the night. Fumbling ground balls, weren't able
Yep.
to hold marks, missing
Oh, so many
handballs.
marks dropped.
And conversely, when our own pressure just isn't effective, I mean, we can talk about my biggest annoyance of that game, which was the amount of missed tackles. If there was
Yeah.
one more missed tackle that happened, my TV would have been thrown over the balcony. I was getting that frustrated watching it. But, when there
Mm.
isn't that pressure around the contest, teams just move through us far too easily, and we don't seem to be able to go with them. We look slow and stagnant. And then just like the
Yep.
last thing that is another point that just was rearing its head in this game was us failing to adjust tactically and on the field. As soon as the other team got their dominance, we didn't seem to be able to get things back on our terms. And I could probably name you a whole other case of deficiencies that still linger, but
Mm-hmm.
I know they're not there every game. This is it's
Yeah.
not like it's a once off, but there are some games that they're not all there. Some games we look okay, but it's almost until they stop continuing to happen and until these completely drop from our game, they're going to continue to be an issue and be something we talk about. I guess I've named a bunch there, but
Mm.
do you think that there's a reason as to why these do keep happening and we aren't able to grow past them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I guess I'll put my press conference hat on for 1 second and just call out that obviously we played the best team in the league. This isn't making excuses, just naming facts. Just a reminder, it is the best team in the league, the form team at a place where, what is it? We've won there twice in 20, 30 years or something. So it was a tough task already. And I guess we knew that we had to play really well and limit those deficiencies that you've just talked about if we were going to be any chance. So that's I guess like the optimistic thing that I'm trying to take from it. Like obviously the midfield dominance that they had over us was a really obvious thing to the eye watching it. And the optimist in me is trying to be like, was that just very matchup dependent and tactically sound from then? And we didn't adapt, like you mentioned. And then we come into Gold Coast this week and suddenly we're so happy with the mids again and how they're functioning. Like, it's hard for me to remove myself from this one game because it just felt so hopeless. So hopeless. We couldn't do a thing.
No, and it's just that really annoying element around this where when you keep seeing the same things happen in our losses, in our bad performances, you start to lose a little bit of that faith that we are growing and we are evolving, and you start to look at the ladder position and the win-loss record and the fixture, and you just start to really get yourself in a negative spiral. It's so easy to do. You jump on social media, you start listening to what Talkback has to say, what the wider media, everything's going to be very negative. So I do like that you did bring up the point in talking about the opposition, because I think it's incredibly valid that it's awesome. It's not making excuses, because we want to be the best. We want to be in that position. So losing to someone isn't necessarily acceptable, but you've really got to commend Sydney in what they were able to do. They're the informed team right now. And if we're not bringing our best against Sydney on the SCG at their home ground, they know how to play that better than anyone else. They would almost structure up in certain ways to dominate at that home ground.
You could see it.
You've got to be your best to beat a team like that. And not only are we not at our best personnel-wise, then as soon as the midfield drops off, and I think something that really frustrated me, that it just felt and this is the thing, there's so many basics in this game that went wrong for us. We just kept getting sucked into the contest. Guys like Kennedy or Hewitt would sag off someone like Warner. He would just simply sit out. Sydney win the contest. All of a sudden, you wonder why teams look so fast against us. And I know we don't have the fastest midfield in general, but it's more about movement around the stoppage. And when you allow so much space from the way you're setting up around the contest, of course they're going to look faster, because they're hitting the contest at speed in space. They've got 20 meters to run into. It's just not good enough. We need to be smarter with that. I think there are stages, the Collingwood game springs to mind, that I thought were really bad in our structure around stoppage. And then weirdly, we were so good at it against Melbourne. I'm not sure what is changing. And that's kind of where I want to ask, is a lot of this and how you're trying to quantify it, is it around the lack of personnel and the players that we have available? Do you believe that, and I know this is somewhat a silly exercise to some degree, but if we have guys like a Chera, if we have our best players out there, do you think that a lot of these problems are solved? And if so, does that mean that we're more personnel-based than system-based, or are we just at that breaking point level when it comes to injuries?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, the way I'm thinking about like the personnel and the injury stuff, which I know we'll get deeper into, is it's probably less to me about exactly who is out there for this game, but more the fact of the lack of continuity that we have had all this season.
Yeah.
Like they were talking about, obviously, the stat that we had something like 10 players that have played every game, and Sydney had 17. Like, I think that really speaks to how important that continuity piece really is. Like, it just takes time to be able to understand how everyone's going to play with each other. And you know, Chera comes back for a little bit, and that changes the midfield dynamic, and then it goes out. And it's happening all over the field. So it's so hard to like retrospectively look at these things and answer it in that way. I guess the point I'm making is, you know, next week we're hoping to get some soldiers back, and I don't necessarily think that is going to mean there's a massive boost right away. It's going to take time then to get those guys back in.
No, I totally agree with that. And I think you answered that really well. And when you look at the team we did play and put out on the park against the Swans, we definitely had enough to win with the cattle out there. We just didn't execute. We just didn't execute in so many areas. And until we are able to do that, and as far as the adjusting as well in game, whether this is on field as players, whether it's in the coach's box, like we still put on the first 5 goals of the game, got that lead, looked good. Sydney got back into it, and then I don't know what it was that fell off. There is just like still something with this side that as soon as we start to get fumbly, things start to disappear. Is that an inability to handle pressure? But then there's other elements where you go, how well did we handle that pressure in other games? So I don't want to just hyper focus on one performance. You lose Jacob Wiedering at halftime. What does that do to on-field leadership and the way that we structured up behind the ball?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not going to just sit here and make the excuses and say that's why we did lose, because I think when it comes down to us failing to execute the fundamentals, that's where I'll put the blame. But equally, we just need to grow and get better and make sure that we do start to turn these things around. And personnel-wise, obviously it's going to help when you have those guys in there. And maybe we are, to a degree, a little reliant on a few players in particular, maybe more than system, because we don't have the depth in certain roles.
Yes.
But we just got to find a way to make that work. And that was probably my disappointing factor around the lack of adjusting when Sydney got on top. And is that us not being able to move magnets because of personnel, or are we just not smart enough in the coach's box and on field to make those changes happen? Because we just never found a way to really get back into that game. Even when at halftime, it felt like we were still in it. And then that third quarter just went to water.
What did you make of, like, obviously this isn't an in-game tactic, but like Williams forward, for example, like an experiment like that?
It's interesting. We're probably at the stage, because I did see some people really like it. I saw some people vehemently hate it and say that if he's playing half forward, if he's not playing half back, then he shouldn't even be in the team. We shouldn't be trying something like that. It's too early to move people in positions. There's not enough time. But I don't know. I think when I'm looking, and we will do this, we're going to have a look at the depth chart and look at the injured players. I'm not sure who else you can kind of plug and play into these roles. And honestly, I thought Zach Williams was one of our better players out there on the night. So it's a strange one. It's not the ideal scenario, but I think the output that we got out of Zach Williams in that forward role was probably better than anyone else we could have had in there. And I'm not sure he gets a look in that backline right now. So I don't mind us trying things like that. And look, it didn't work, but I don't even mind us trying a Durden in the middle just to see if something happens. And again, people are frustrated that we're trying different things because this guy hasn't done anything in the forward line, so why are we bother trialing him in the midfield? I'm just thinking I'd rather see us do something than us continue to do the exact same thing and it not work. So that's where I'm kind of seeing it in a bit of a bigger picture. How big and how bad was this loss, Lockie? Are there any sort of implications that you're taking from it? I know a lot of looking at that ladder position right now, looking at the fixture coming up and thinking we're in a bit of a tough spot. The injuries are there. Is top four starting to disappear? Are we no longer going to make the top eight? So are you taking a lot from this loss in that sense? And how are you seeing us, I guess, moving forward from here?
Yeah, the ladder is pretty interesting at the moment, which I know there's plenty of commentary around. It doesn't really worry me that much, just because there is such a cluster around that, like second to 10 or 11 or whatever it is. Again, trying to pull myself out of this situation. Like, we've seen, how many times have we seen a team do a performance like this and then come back the next week and just fucking light it up? It just happens all the time. So many examples, even just this season, of that happening. So I'm definitely not doom and gloom in that regard. I definitely still think top four is a good goal for us to be aiming for. Like 6 and 4 is not. We thought that we'd be better at this stage than we are. But I know, and we keep alluding to it. But my biggest concern is just that: are we ever going to get the continuity in this team that will take us to being a premiership side? Because I just don't remember the last time that we said that we had genuine continuity from our best 23 guys. No,
that's definitely my biggest annoyance, frustration right now on things. To be the best and to win flags, you have to have your best players out there. Teams don't win a flag with half their side out. It doesn't happen. And we're at this stage, and we spoke about it in preseason. We spoke about it a few weeks ago, saying, how do we react when we go through a tough patch? And how is that going to look? And it's really annoying that it's not necessarily just form related. There's so many other factors that are dictating us getting the best out of ourselves right now.
Yeah.
If we were fully fit to a decent degree and chucking out performances like this, then you can go and start to be ridiculously worried about that. But when you're injured as well,
Agreed.
there's just so many more factors that are leading that frustration. I think I'm not trying to look at too many games in advance. I'm not trying to look at the ladder because we're in 10th or something at the moment, but we're one win away from third spot on the ladder. That's how
Correct.
close things are right now. I wouldn't have looked at the ladder, except I wanted to see how far away we were from those top teams right now. Because, I don't know, if anyone can be resilient and turn things around, it's this team in particular. We saw last season, so I'm not going to get bogged down in where we are right now. I want to look at performances in isolation and what we're building week in, week out. That's kind of where I'm seeing things. So I feel that. It's not an acceptable loss by any stretch. No one is happy with that performance, but you just have to turn it around and find ways to win. And hopefully we're not going to be playing the most informed team in the comp every single week, although it feels like that might be happening a little bit at this stage. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on from that Sydney game before we move on to the big hot topic in the media meltdown this week?
Let's do it. Let's melt down.
Easy. So the big discussion point feels like if we had a tally for media meltdown and what was the main topic, I think this is almost it every single time. It is another injury crisis, Lockie, the topic on everyone's lips. And I kind of wanted to do this a little bit differently because I know you're someone who's very, very sick of this conversation. I feel like I can always get some more miles out of it. Maybe that's just my crazy mind going for it and my changing of opinions, which seems to happen quite often. But look, the first thing I wanted to look at is trying to look at who actually is injury prone. This has been the discussion. Everyone's trying to put blame on someone to try to solve this. Let's take a look at the players to start with, Lockie. Now, I've done a bit of research here, and those who are listening in audio form over Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to us, maybe head over to YouTube on Blue Abroad right now because I'm going to throw up this graphic to make it a lot easier to digest, but I'll do my best for those listening to read the information out for you. But basically, I've taken out some of those injury-prone or potentially injury-prone players. We're talking McGovern, Marchbank, Sard, Williams, Pitternet, Walsh, Chera, Doherty, Martin, Fogarty, Cunningham, Silvani, and Motlop. Now, the fact that I've said that many players already is very worrying, considering most of those players are best starting 22, 23 if fit. But I basically grabbed those guys and I've gone back in time. I'm looking at 2024 this season, 2023, and 2022. I have compiled a list of their games played and games missed in those seasons, missed through to injury, and made up a bit of a percentage here. So those watching right now will see a few colors. Those in red, they have missed 40% of a season or more, and those in yellow have missed 25% or more. So a lovely quarter there of the season, which I think is important sort of mark to start with. Now, Lockie, is there anyone that you sort of wanted to look at to start with that maybe really shocked you or stood out with the amount of games that they have missed?
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to get, I think, caught up in the short term with some of these names. Like the first thing that jumps out is a few guys that, played a lot of games in 23 and 22. And my memory is telling me that they didn't. I think Doherty might be an example of that, and Chera as well. Two guys where it feels like they're always in and out, but really not really the case. It's actually just been a this season thing.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. So I want to go straight to that. We'll look at Adam Chera, a recently injured player. He missed 4 games at 18% in 2022. And then he missed again 4 games in 23 at 15% because we played more games, Lockie. This season, He's missed 4 games at 40%. I think the more concern around Chera at this stage is the more frequency of the injuries and how that seems to be increasing. I believe it's his 4th hamstring injury since last season. I think it was like around 19 or something similar to that. That's more of the concern around him. But as far as an injury history, I'm not sure it's there at this stage. Doherty playing 23 games and 22 games in the last couple of seasons, does the ACL. I think we all know that. It's the other, and probably the other one that stands out as maybe not as injury prone as we think is Adam Saad. There's a lot of talk about he's now got these hamstring injuries. Look how bad things are. In 2022, he missed 1 game. And guess how many games he missed in last year? He missed 1. This is a guy that plays a fair chunk of football. So should we be concerned that he's now missed 5 games? Potentially. It's not ideal, particularly when other injuries happen. But I would say right now that if we had a pretty clean bill of health and it was just Adam Saad, no one would be batting an eyelid about his current hamstring strain. But it's more the other ones. And I want to get a definitive answer from you, Lockie. Are these guys injury prone? So let's have a bit of a look at Mitch McGovern. Missed in 2022, 63%, then 15%, and now he's missed 30% of games. Is Gov injury prone?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a subjective term, injury prone. I think he is. And it's not necessarily when he misses games. It just feels like with the eye test, how often does something happen to him during a game? It feels like almost a game, an every game occurrence to me.
What do
you think?
I think he does have a hamstring issue because he kind of that's the injury that he keeps getting. It's the same injury every single time. I just don't necessarily maybe think, and who knows, if the injuries blow out this season and he misses another, 63% of games, then I'll say, yes, he's still completely broken. But when he only misses 4 games last year and he's only missed 3 so far this year, if he doesn't miss another game, I think he might just be that player that he'll miss a couple every year. But the bad ones are obviously Caleb Marchbank missing 63%, 46%, and currently 70%. And for those that are watching or listening and thinking, is this just games missed completely? Like, did he play VFL? No, they didn't play AFL. They didn't play VFL. He was out injured in these times. So I think we're at a point now with Marchbank, and we're going to have this discussion further in the next couple of minutes when we try to maybe shift a little blame around it and have a bit more conversation around this. Marchbank is someone right now that I don't think is worth a gamble at the end of the season as far as relisting right now. And I know we often have the discussion of, well, is a fit Marchbank or Marchbank on the list better than a 18-year-old? Like, who are we actually bringing in? I am at the point where I just want someone new, and I want someone that isn't going to miss over 50% like every single year, because I just don't think you can have someone that's missed that much footy. And this is only 3 years, like 2.5 years right now. And I know he would have missed more if he went back further. I don't think he can hold on to those players.
With Marchbank in particular, I agree with you.
So let's move on to Zach Williams, interestingly, slightly. Missed 13 games at 59% in 2022. Obviously had the ACL last year. He's only missed 1 game this year. Where are you kind of seeing him right now?
Again, maybe we have different definitions of how we talk about injury prone. But like, if I think about a player like Charlie, how often in the last since he came back from all his injuries, does he pull up sore or, something happened in the game? Never. It feels like a game occurrence for Williams. I'm still high on Williams, but I do deem him as injury prone.
I do as well. I would say that he's probably someone, unless he ends up missing, massive chunk of this year, I think he's just someone you kind of have to persist with. But it's frustrating that he is someone that we are getting those little niggles seemingly every couple of weeks. Pito, another recent injury list addition, unfortunately, missed 54%, 27%, now 30% and counting. What do you do with Big Brad?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just going off my feel here and not really the stats. I don't tend to think of him as injury prone. Do you?
I don't know. I don't know where I sit with him right now. I'm happy to
A
fence it
finger
on
is
him
so
because
rogue. Like that's such
he's
a
had like
rogue injury.
he's had some of the back issues. He had an ankle issue in preseason. I
Hmm.
kind of think at the moment he's a big lad that he just needs to get some continuity first. I'm a wait and see on Pitt. I want to see the rest of this year before I make a judgment call.
Do you
Sam
mean
Walsh.
are
Sorry.
you talking about waiting and seeing to determine if they're injury prone, or waiting and seeing to persist with them?
Oh, I'm definitely persisting with Pitto. Some of these
Yeah, I
aren't.
just wanted
When
to
I'm
make sure
saying
that was clear.
yeah, look, when I'm saying injury prone, I'm not saying he's injury prone, so we're delisting at the end of the season or anything
Good.
like that. It's more just trying to figure out the players and positions that we can almost definitively say that we can't trust their durability. And
Okay.
then if you want to, off the back of that, make a call on someone, you can. Pitto, as far as the wait and see, is more on whether he is truly injury prone
Sure.
because he's clearly had some battles, but I don't know. I'm not convinced that they're all stemming from the same issue, which is where
Me
I
too.
would deem someone more prone to injury. Walsh is the interesting one, really starting to
Yeah.
increase year on year 9%, 30%, now 40%. The back injuries, really, the last 2 years. It's another wait and see. We need to see if he can really
Absolutely.
get over these kinds of things and play the rest of the year. But it is a concern when you also look at a guy like Chera who's starting to grow in this. And I know the 2024 is a small sample size, so you're going to have guys that have missed the start of the year, obviously have those red numbers on screen. Can change, but there is growing concern because those two are our high movement, pacier midfielders that both seem to be, I guess, trajectory is pointing up as far as the injuries are concerned.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, I agree. Nothing for me to add to that.
I think Doherty is what Doherty is.
Yep.
ACLs, it happens.
Agreed.
Once you have one, you're going to have more. Jack Martin, what do you do with big Jack Martin now? Because
He's
this
the
is
definition
30,
of what we're talking about here.
yeah, 36%, 42%, and now 90%. The bigger thing with Jack Martin right now is you can't trust him to get 2 weeks in a row. He's almost this plays a week, is out for 2, comes back for 2, misses 4. It almost multiplies by the amount of games he does play. He's so integral when he is on field for us. We don't seem to have depth to replace him. Where are your feelings on Jack Martin and what you want to do with him as a player right now?
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? I mean, for me, I would have him quite a fair bit above Marchbank in terms of my desire to persist.
He would be atop my list. He would be on low wages, which I'm not sure he'll stay if that is the case, as it looks like there's a lot of suitors right now. But we need durable players, and when I'm already got this many people that we're questioning right now, you might need to make some adjustments at the end of the season. Looking at Lockie Fogarty, doesn't seem to be as injury prone as maybe we think at all. Just wanted to throw him out there because he's missed a big chunk this season. It's a wrist injury. He's missed 31%, 19, and now 60. Seem to be all different injuries. I'll cross that one off. But David Cunningham, I mean, 100% with an ACL, 42% with every soft tissue under the sun and a back, and who knows what else this man's got. Now 60% this year, only playing the 3 games, missing 6. Is the time run out for a guy like this?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned with Martin, there's so many nuances with the contracts and that kind of thing. So you can't give just a yes or no. But yeah, how shocked would you be if he plays 22 games next season? Like
incredibly shocked.
That would be insane.
Yeah,
it just doesn't seem feasible.
No,
not that everyone has to, but you know.
And my worry with a guy like him in Marchbank currently, and it's hard, I guess, due to the continuity that you are alluding to, but what I have kind of seen for them, I guess, this year is they aren't at the level that I saw them at last year. So are these injuries really taking a toll on their capabilities out there now and how they feel on field potentially? So that's a problem. Silvani and Motlop are the last two I sort of brought up there. They were both fine in 2022. Silvani missed 27% last year. He's missed 100% with the ACL. Where do you see him?
Yeah, no, neither of these. I think about
Yeah.
them in that category personally.
Yeah, I agree with you because I think Motlop's another that starts to be rearing his head as far as an injury-prone player, but 4.5%, 7.7%. Yeah, he's missed 100% right now, and it's a concern on the
It's a weird
re-injury of
one.
things, but he's missed 100% of games, 10 games so far, but I don't know if he doesn't miss one for the rest of the season. I think we aren't having that discussion, which is
Agreed.
something that so that's something I just wanted to take a look at, having a look at who actually is injury prone before we have a look at the depth chart, because it's what we love, Lockie. We
We
want to
love a chart.
see whereabouts these players actually are and what we can pick from right now, because this is the concern. The
Oh
concern
boy.
is we can't get our cattle out there. So I wanted to actually try to visualize what is going on right now. Lockie, we're bringing out the depth chart. Those that are watching, green is best 23, yellow is best 30. So basically, if you're in green or yellow, you're fighting for contention every single week. We see you as a key player. Everyone else is that little bit of depth. There are a few players that are higher on that, closer to playing games, but that is where I'm seeing things right now. How concerning are those injured players, and is there something that you can see as a maybe an area on the ground that we lack right now?
Anyone that isn't concerned by this, I'd love to hear the reasoning.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, obviously all the reds in the half forwards is something that stands out.
Yes.
That's the reason why Williams, or one of the reasons why Williams went forward this week. It's definitely, and I guess it's been an area of concern over the past few years, and we've wanted to get continuity and growth from players in this position. Elijah Hollands has honestly probably been better so far in his first 9 or 10 games for Carlton than I even expected, which is awesome. But apart around that, it's like, get him out there.
Yeah, no, and looking at, I guess, those best 23 players that aren't fit and available, and I know some of these will change, which we'll get onto in a couple of minutes, but at the moment, Sard, Pitternet, Chera, Doherty, Martin, Cottrell, Fogarty, and Motlop all have not been available from that starting team. And then that high half forward, kind of general forward, is that main issue where your next few guys to come in, if there is one or two injuries, is Cunningham and Silvani, both out. Both probably Silvani's out for the year. And it just, when you get this amount of injuries and injuries to one position, because this is something that I've tried not to listen and read into it a lot, but you see discussions online of people saying, oh, like, this is where your depth are meant to come into it, and this is what good teams do. But the issue is that our depth is injured. The guys that would replace these players, they're also injured. And probably your more flexible types that if you get an injury in the midfield can swing there, or you've got an injury somewhere else. That is really that half forward section, like Martin, Cottrell, Fogarty, Cunningham, Silvani. You can throw maybe Doherty into this as well. They're the most versatile players we have on our list right now. They're all injured. So you can't really move some magnets around. When you look at this, does that make you think that when things aren't going right on field, that it is just a case of not being able to change the actual players out there? Or is it more coaching and application?
It's so hard to rank each of those things, or I guess know which is which. But I just, I continue to have so much faith in those 23 green names there. And I think that it's the most talented 23 in the whole league. So you can make of that what you will.
I'll try to. So moving on from that, this is basically what the depth chart that you just saw looks like with all those other players removed. So again, very visual. Feel free to head over to Blue Abroad on YouTube to see all of this. And yeah, there are a lot of positions moving, a lot of green disappearing from that. So what do we got to do, Lockie? We have to change that. And I'll add them back in. They'll be in red, but we have to adjust who is our best 23 and who is that next best top 30. So in this, Sard out, Chincotta in, Chera comes out, Kennedy goes in, Ollie Hollands comes in for Doc, Durden in for Motlop, Fantasia for Martin, Carroll for Cottrell, Binns for Fogarty. That is who is replacing your best 23. Do you think that that's too big of a drop?
In what regard?
As far as the talent to replace those, or do you think that that talent there is still enough?
Enough to like win this week, you mean? Or
I'm talking about to win a premiership, to be top 4, to be a team that week in, week out over the next month competes.
No, not with no.
And then I guess to rattle out the top 30, you've then got Cunningham out, Ashton Moyer replaces him, Lemmy replaces Silvani. And then you got adding into that again, just because obviously there's some positions available in the top 30, Young, Wilson, and Murkov move into it. The only 2 players currently fit that don't make the top 30 are Dom Q and Rob Monahan. So that's insane, Lockie, right now. That when you're looking at the players that you're trying to select from week in, week out, if someone's out of form, okay, X player gets to replace them, put the pressure on. There's absolutely no one right now. And that is a massive, massive cause for concern. And it's really stifling us. Now, I know I'm very hot on the depth charts. You're seeing a lot of figures here, but let's move towards this week. And this is the final one. Don't you worry, because we should have some cattle back, Lockie. Does this make things better for you? In comes Sard, in comes Fogarty, in comes Motlop.
Mm-hmm.
How is that right now? Because those few players definitely make things look a little better, but where are your still areas for concern?
For sure. I mean, like, I do think that we are going to win this week, and I think there are some big ins there. Forward line. Where's the third option? Like, that's just always been a problem, and it felt like it was going to come with PDK and Pit Rucking and Martin back, and now it's like, who's going to be making that option up forward, apart from the big 2?
Yeah, it hurts. And the good thing is, throughout this, I think the defense has looked like the best area. There's not too many injuries there. The depth we have can cover things. Midfield's a bit of a worry in the sense of, I don't think we had a lot of depth to begin with in this position. You take Chera out, Carroll and Kennedy just aren't those kinds of players to replace a guy like Chera. Maybe you would have liked to throw a Doherty in there, who's maybe slightly more towards the Chera ilk. You've got guys like Cunningham, Cottrell, Martin, or do you throw a Hollands in there? But again, there's now no one to cover those positions. So it is that sort of front half attacking players that we're struggling with. And we've kind of been exposed to a bit of the depth in the small forwards. Durden and Fantasia have kind of shown that they're just not up to it, to the sense of they shouldn't be in our best 22 every single week. But unfortunately, we've had to play them because there's been no one else. Are we going to get some of these players back? Maybe, maybe not. There's still enough high-end talent for me to win enough games of football, be competitive, push for top 4. We just can't be getting any more injuries, because trying to pick a big team out of this is getting hard every single week.
It's true. I appreciate this.
Yeah, so I guess off that, I want to have some big discussions. Now that we've looked at the injury-prone players, we've seen what effect that has on who is available, who we can select, and the positions. I've got to ask a big question, and this is trying to maybe put some blame somewhere, at least have a discussion around it, rather than just piling it on one or two individuals. Do you think that we went in, having a look at that depth chart, we went into the season with too many injury-prone players that we can't truly rely on?
Well, I guess... Can I start by asking you a question?
Of course.
Did you think in November that the list was too injury prone?
this is the thing. I think it was the first time we had seen a lot of those players finally fit. We had,
Yep.
obviously,
Agree.
we weren't worrying too much about Doherty at that stage. Martin was finally fit. Cunningham was up and about. Chera, there was no issues. So, I mean, I wasn't really too concerned, I guess, because it looked like things were turning around. And the positive side of me was hoping that we had turned a corner with a few of these players. I would say that, and we discussed this at multiple stages, the only concerns were, are we slightly too thin in the midfield, particularly on those more versatile Chera Walsh players? And then what's that forward line look like if we don't have a Jack Martin fit? Do we have someone that actually replicates what he does? We brought in Ashton Moyer as that young draftee. He wasn't going to be someone that could come in straight away and just be Jack Martin. I was hopeful that he'd maybe get a bit more footy and be closer to playing than he is currently. But you can't be relying on an 18-year-old to be one of your better forwards. So I think there was still some concern, but I think that positive side would have just hoped that we were finally seeing the best out of these players.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. That's why I'm trying to take my hindsight bias out of this. I remember, like there's obvious examples like Curnow and Doherty, where these guys missed so much footy and then strung so much footy together after that. So then when I see a guy like Cunningham last year, what did he miss? Like 2.5 years, or was it that long? I can't even remember. Ages. He comes back and he plays pretty much every game for the rest of the season. So it's like I'm looking at him there and I'm like, how do I know what this guy is? So I remember being exactly like you, feeling pretty comfortable with things. Just a couple of specific positions where it's like, well, if Martin isn't right, and we already know that Silvani's out, what does that mean for us?
Yeah, I think my opinion on it is, and it's so easy after it all happens in hindsight to change your opinion, but I'm going to say that you almost had to make the risk for one season because of what we saw in the back half last year. You had to say, okay, I'm not sure we can bring in anyone else right now that replaces a Cunningham, that replaces a Jack Martin, that replaces a Marchbank and gets a similar level of output fully fit. Agreed. Back it in for a year because we saw it work so well. And it hasn't panned out at the moment. That's an issue. But yeah, it's all about what we do from here on out. I'm not trying to look too much in the past. However, I will ask this question. Do you think that we made a bit of a wrong call in pre-season as far as the training loads? I know this has been brought up. I know we're not experts in this area. So and it's hard to discuss some of this because we don't have the information. We don't have the smarts to know if this was the right plan. But is that somewhere you're starting to think is where some of these soft tissue injuries broke down, going too hard closer to the season to try to make up for that early buy? Or was this, again, something that was worth giving it a go?
Yeah, I can't talk to the specifics, as you mentioned, but I like the fact that they tried to do something different. Yes,
I agree. And I will say, before I really start talking a little bit more about personnel in the club, you back in the people that you employ. If they come up with an idea, if you're working with them on an idea and they think that this is the best way to do it, I like innovation. I like us trying something different, and I back in the people we pay to be experts to do it rather than saying, no, let's not listen to what they're saying. The results, however, will be what demonstrates success or failure. But I think you do have to back those people in. So in saying that, Lockie, do you think that we need to make adjustments in the off-season as far as any... I want to look at this a few different ways. Playing list-wise, list management. Are we talking Andrew Russell? Are we talking Brad Lloyd that hasn't come into these discussions? Do you think there needs to be any kind of adjustments in the off-season due to the yet again, high level of injured players and having these discussions where we can't get our best players out there each and every week?
Yes. Yes. It's a great question. I'd love you to answer it first while I continue to think about this.
Well, I have a lot of different things that I'm willing to go into. I'll
You're
kind
a
of
lot-
start with,
Yeah. You're more passionate on this than me.
I think adjustments almost should be made everywhere. That doesn't
That's
necessarily
what I was
mean
going to lead with.
that doesn't necessarily mean the adjustment is a person fired. I want to just say that right now because
Agree.
I think you can do other things. Regarding the playing list, I think Nick Austin needs some sort of level of responsibility in this, and he probably isn't getting it because we're all pretty happy with what we get from Nick Austin and who he brings into the club. But he's the one that re-signs these players, these injury-prone guys, wasn't able to bring in durable depth into positions that we knew were problems. We've talked about ruck depth that seems to take another hit now that Pito's there. God forbid De Koning goes down and we have Murkov or Murkov is our only ruck because now O'Keefe's hurt his hamstring taking a screamer at open training. Like, Lewis Young's going to be the ruck. So I think there's clear deficiencies with a few things that Nick Austin's doing that some part of the blame needs to go on him. And at the end of the season, I am at the point, and maybe my opinion may change. I'm happy to be swayed, and people will say that's a bad thing to do. You should stick to your principles. But if I get new information that sways me, I'm more than happy to change my opinion based on evidence. And right now, I'm at the breaking point of, I'm sorry, guys like Martin, Marchbank, and Cunningham, I'm not getting at least half a season out of you every year. I can't back you in every single week. I think you need to look elsewhere. And whether you hold on to one of those, whether it's none, that's kind of where I'm looking right now. But it's also at who is replacing them and making sure it's not just one player, it's two, because clearly their roles, when we lose just one of them, we don't have that person to replace.
I'm in general agreement with that.
I guess the next point is on like Brad Lloyd, just a little bit, just to put a bit of heat on someone else that isn't getting spoken about, because it's a whole club thing. This isn't just one person's component, and he's the head of footy, and he's someone that we don't necessarily hear from a lot. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I will happily fence it there. And the interesting component of this is he is the only real survivor from the big David Teague review. They said there was some issues, but they thought that he could overcome them, and with a bit more guidance and maybe less people taking his job away from him, he's the right man. He makes a lot of those high decisions in the footy program. So I kind of ask him questions of, what are you doing to ensure that we aren't killing the players each and every week and that we have the right people in to execute the football program? He's someone that doesn't get spoken about a lot. I think accountability needs to go towards him a little bit. And then the last one obviously is Andrew Russell, who, I mean, we've spoken at length about this man. The pressure comes for him immediately every single time. Has your stance or opinions changed at all, Lockie? Because you, of course, you haven't necessarily been that staunch defender of him.
No,
but you've definitely not been in the sack Andrew Russell camp.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is you mentioned about like backing the people that you hire, right? For me, I then think about like the Prez and the CEO. I'm definitely very pro in each of their camps. So and I think I've said this before about Russell. If they decide that the time is up with him, then I am all for it. That is so fine. And if they think that the best thing for us is to continue with it, because like we've spoken about, who's gonna lead the strength and conditioning if not him? If there's nobody better out there, then that doesn't make any sense. So at this stage, I still just really back the highest level of leadership with the club. So if I'm just going to trust them, because when you're in our position and you can only know so many things, like that's, I guess, the default position. And if people have problems with the people that are making all the big decisions, then that's, I guess, a different conversation. Yeah.
It's such a difficult thing to have in this discussion because you're right. We not none of us are trained in this. None of us know enough about the topic itself, let alone what is even happening within the four walls and what is leading to these things. I've kind of been very fence sitting on Andrew Russell, defended a lot of times, and I still will go back to quite a lot saying broke stays broke. Can you overcome these soft tissue injuries? I don't think you can a lot of the time. I'm looking at a lot of the teams that I support in other sports, guys that continually do the same injury time after time. And I can't tell you how many of those have really been able to get better over time. It feels like it's a gradual, you just get worse and worse until eventually you're never playing and you're moved out to a different club. That is how a lot of these things happen. We've looked at the depth. We've looked at those that are injury prone. I think we can definitely see who those players are.
Yep.
The only, I guess, the couple of questions I have on Russell and the overall program and everyone involved, not to just highlight one person because he's leading it. It's not just him. There's multiple people there. Can you at least better manage training loads, everything around these players to ensure that these injuries are either less frequent or less severe? Now, obviously, their goal is this. Their goal is not trying to make players injured. They're doing what they best believe ensures that these guys aren't injured. They want a best team out there.
I agree with you.
However, and I want to put this out there, I'm at the breaking point with what I'm seeing, and this I want your opinion. I want everyone watching this and listening to these opinions as well.
Yeah, let us know.
Because I know, Lockie, you're probably going to go straight back at me with very reasonable, very reasonable and rational thoughts. But and I'm not sure a lot of my reasonings are in rationality, but I don't think I'm going to be swayed in this. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
I love this.
When it's been 6 years, and we might have injury-prone players. It might be the list. It might be other things. If I'm not seeing an improvement in managing injuries, and it seems as if it's only getting worse, and my gripe right now, and I'm happy to list them all, is not injuries that are happening in games. They're injuries that are happening in training and rehabbing injuries. I'll go through them because I've spent way too much time writing these down. We have this year, Jacob Wiedering, calf strain in preseason, missed the first 2 games of the year. Silvani, stiff ACL, don't worry about that one. Walsh, back in preseason, missed the first 4 games of this year. Jack Martin, he's a tough one because he's that outlier, but MCL sprain in preseason, but then does a hamstring strain while training / rehabbing his MCL injury, missed the first 8 games of the season, plays a game, bang, again in training, out. Always calf in preseason. Durden, hamstring in preseason. Motlop, toe injury, unlucky. It was in a practice game, but then does a hamstring strain in training, rehabbing his toe, then does another hamstring strain, rehabbing his hamstring strain, which I don't know how you'd injure yourself after injuring yourself after injuring yourself. That feels insane to me. They missed the first 10 games of the season. How are we managing this guy? I understand sometimes there's setbacks, but that's 10 games now. Cunningham, again, injury prone, so there's an asterisk on him, but calf strain in training, misses 5 games after playing 1 AFL game, half a VFL game, calf again. Chera, hamstring strain in training, withdrawn from the Adelaide game. He's missed 3 games in total, then comes back in, unable to get through 2 games, hamstring again. And then Cottrell, who's had a little bit of a history of some stress responses. He's got that navicular stress reaction in his left foot, will miss 4 games from now. Again, it felt like it was something that wasn't necessarily just in-game, was training. So I guess with all of that and seeing guys getting more injured while rehabbing, guys getting injured in training, us not getting the best out of them, the end of the season, I think we need to move on from Andrew Russell for the sense of surely the next guy can't do worse, because I'm not seeing any level of improvement. I'm seeing either stability in everyone seems to be getting injured. We're not getting more out of people. We're not being able to rehab better. No one is getting over these injuries.
Yeah.
I just think we're at that point where a new voice and try something else, because clearly what is there doesn't seem to be working. If that makes sense. I'm keen to get your thoughts on all of that.
No, it definitely makes sense. I'm not going to go back hard at you at any of that, because it is like, as you said, the results speak for themselves. I guess the only comment I would make to your basically your last point, which is surely someone else wouldn't do worse. I have zero evidence to say that anybody would do better. I just can't justify any way that it would be improved. And I'm not going to contradict myself, because we said that we liked what they did in the preseason because it was something different. So if you're telling me that if all I know is they're going to bring in a new strength and conditioning coach to say, whatever his title is, we're going to bring in a new Andrew Russell to do something different, great. I'm all for trying different things. That's fine. But I just don't know the specifics of, I wouldn't be shocked if it got worse because,
And that's the hard. It's tough. And on kind of one of the points you raised, because I wanted to slightly clarify my stance. I'm happy to try something different, like we did in preseason, because I think you can't sit there and be like, sorry, Andrew Russell, we're employing you, but we don't trust that what you're doing is the correct thing. So you can't do it. No, he's your employee. You back him in.
Yeah.
Clearly it hasn't worked. Clearly it has made things worse due to a lot of soft tissue injuries that tend to happen due to the change and the drastic training loads. Maybe we put them through too much with the amount of little strains we were getting in that preseason. So, I think you back in who's your employee, but if they're not getting you the results and they're seemingly making poor decisions, then you get someone else and then you back them in. So, I think I'm just at that stage where, it could get worse. The next guy could come in and be worse than Russell, but I think I'm willing to take that chance because I'm not seeing the upside right now of us spending potentially the most money in the AFL on this position. And I'm not sure what the reward is, not just injury-wise, but are we covering the field better than other teams? Do we look stronger? Do we look faster? I'm not sure I'm seeing all of those things. So I just... Do we just need a new voice? I think that's where I'm kind of sitting with that. Last things I wanted to touch on this before we move on, because it's been a big thing, but it's been a big topic to talk about, is do you think that there's a level in this of players maybe put it back on them? Are they not listening to their bodies and just trying to push through when they are injured? Is that causing it more than it's to try and play devil's advocate and defend a guy like Russell? He can only do what he can if I'm there with Motlop pushing him through his rehab and he's being like, nah, I'm good. I'm feeling okay. Okay, let's do one more session because you're telling me you're fine. And then he pings his hamstring because it turns out he wasn't fine.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's something that could be happening as well?
Yeah, I like that you raised that. I mean, one of the points you mentioned before that I considered arguing was, exactly the Motlop example. You said, I'm not sure how he can, do a hamstring and then in the rehab again and again. Like, I've been fortunate to have a few number of injuries in my life, but all of them I have injured multiple times. And they just, that's just what bodies are.
I'll be honest, I was having a bit of fun because it did sound funny when I was saying he's injured his hamstring and then he's injured his hamstring while rehabbing his injured hamstring. So I do understand how that happens. I'm the most injury prone, You think Jack Martin's injury prone? Look at my medical history. My God, I go for a run and I'll tear.
You could have been
absolutely
anything.
Oh, absolutely not. I was dog shit. I'm one of those guys that was like, I could have been an absolute star in Div 12. I could have been a star down there. Unfortunately, my body wouldn't allow me to do that. But
I remember those North Ringwood days, mate. You could have been anything.
But it's just funny, but like I do agree with you on that point. I think that there is this level of sometimes in rehab you do push yourself. So I don't know. Does that need to take some blame?
I appreciate the devil's advocate approach.
I wanted to try to have a bit more level-headedness around this discussion, which is what we try to do on the podcast. And the last thing is simply past the injury. How well do you think that we actually manage the players? Because I'm looking at it this week to try and pivot towards a bit more of the preview that I know is the thumbnail, is the title of this episode. But there was a lot to get through before we got there. I hope you've enjoyed the chat. We've got a lot of guys that are a test for this week. So if they pass the fitness test, they seem to come straight in.
That's a great point.
Should we be going, you're fit, you've passed the test, another week for you? Particularly when you're looking at guys like a Chera, a Sard, some of these guys that maybe have a little, like McGovern, I don't know, guys that have a bit more of a somewhat history in this space. Do you think that we're playing them too early for the sake of, hey, it's the first time they're fit, bring them in? And in the case of a guy like Big Brad Pitt, who had the finger surgery, we played him. Now he's hurt it even worse and he'll probably miss more time. Do you think we play guys when they aren't fit to start with?
Yeah, no, I cannot give a rational opinion on that topic because when I see the injury report and I see test, the first thing I think is, get him in. Straight in with you. Fogarty was 1 to 2 weeks and now he's a test. Good enough for me.
Should have played last week.
Yeah, exactly.
Make him the sub.
So no, it's too hard. It's too hindsight biased on these things. Like we were talking just before the show that we both didn't think that Pitt was going to come up. Like I've broken a number of my fingers, and there's no way that I'm doing any sport the next week off one of them. So but he gets through the game, and we say, brilliant.
Absolutely. No, it's that last thing that this is why it's obviously I've said. I am end of season, just make a change. But this is where everyone needs to be held accountable and we need to really look into every facet of this. And look, those at the club, they will be looking at every inch of this. You don't think Vossi, Sayers, and Cookie are fuming right now.
Oh, they're pissed.
Trying to figure out what the hell is going on. These are their jobs on the line as well. So it's going to be all encompassing. They're going to be saying, are we running guys back into the team too quickly? Are we playing guys when they shouldn't be and taking risks because we want to win now? There's so many facets of this, but leave your thoughts. What do you think? How are you seeing the injury crisis? Are you shifting blame to everyone like it seems like we have, where everyone's at fault? Is it one person? What adjustments would you make if you're in power? That's always a fun discussion. So drop it in the comments if you're on YouTube. Head over to the socials at Navy Blue Corner if you are listening in audio form. But look, last thing to cover on the actual Sydney game before we can finally move on from this. We need to do the votes. The Navy Blue Corner Blue Bagger Badge of Honor. Give me your 3, 2, 1. And those watching and listening, let me know your votes.
I'm not justifying these today because this game made me sad. I'm giving 3 to Newman, 2 to Elijah Hollands, and I'm giving my single vote to Boydie.
Yeah. No, I really like those. I was very, very similar. 3 to Newman, 2 to Elijah. God, what an absolute find this guy is.
I love him.
Absolutely elite. I almost gave it to Brody Kemp, but then I remembered I wanted to give the one to Zach Williams because I was getting frustrated seeing the intent out there, particularly an intent to tackle. And whether he was great or not, I loved seeing the intent from Zach Williams out on the field. He was running and chasing down everything. I could see him working, and so I wanted to give a vote for that. So, blueprint to victory. Put everything in the review mirror, Lockie. We're looking at the Gold Coast game. let's go to team selection. Let's skip the what do you want to see for a
Sure.
second. Let's go to
Alright, I
more
like it.
juiciness because, as we alluded to, Wiedering, Motlop, Sard, Fogarty all test to play this week. Pitto is out. Who are you bringing in? Who's coming out? And why? And again, let's start a discussion in the comments. Let's start it over on the socials. What's your team selection this week, chat? But most importantly, Lockie, what's yours?
Yeah. It's so hard to be definitive with like 3 tests. And I've got way more players that I want to bring out than I can bring in right now.
I agree. That's tough. And that goes back to that depth chart. We don't have the players to bring in the guys that I want out of this team on form.
Exactly. I just don't feel like Fantasia and Durden are leading to winning football at the moment.
They're part of my top 3 to come out right now. I'm not getting enough out of those 2. Durden not laying tackles is frustrating when he's meant to be that tackle pressure player. And then Fantasia's just not doing anything anywhere, ever on the field. So those 2 for me are coming out. Fogarty and Motlop, if fit, come straight back in. I know I've questioned the test thing, but
look, get them in.
They say they're fit. Get the boys in. We need them at this stage. My other big change.
Next minute, they both re-injure in the game, and then we're like, sack Russell.
Oh, who would have thought? Marchbank comes out. I didn't mind him coming in matchup wise. Didn't seem to work. Was it an incorrect decision? Probably, but I mean, I backed it in, so fair enough. But he looks bad right now. He looks slow, off the pace. Yep. He needs a run in the VFL before he ever gets a look in for a while. And Sard straight in for that. I think that sort of says itself. Then Pitto, I'm bringing in Binsey. The bins are coming in. It's bin night.
Wow.
I think he deserves it right now, and a bit more versatility around the place, a bit more run on the outside. I don't begrudge them for not bringing him in for a Sydney game. That can be kind of tough for your first start, like your first full game.
Yeah,
that's not me saying the Gold Coast aren't a good team. They're flying at the moment and play some great football, but I just think there's slight pressure off in that. And right now, there's almost no one else to bring in. And then Jack Carroll's basically going to remain as my sub.
How do you see that working with Bins? Like, on the wing, midfield time?
I've got so many guys floating in positions at the moment. Like, I will keep Zach Williams in that half forward to kind of start with Sard coming back into the defense. Hollands hasn't been amazing on the wing, so he can kind of work with that rotation, but then also be help in that mid-forward connection. I think we've lost a lot with Matty Cottrell being out. So I just want to replace that with a lot of running. And one thing that Binns is really impressed with since he's come to Carlton compared to what he was in his under-18 footy is his kind of defensive running and defensive actions. That's something that I know he has worked on quite a lot and improved considerably. So I kind of want him to mold a little bit in that role, play a bit of hybrid. And maybe if you allow him to play half forward or on the wing, it can maybe that allows Elijah Hollands to go into the midfield, a Walsh on half forward, a Cripps to play in forward, Kennedy to play forward. I just like that. I mean, one, there's no one else to select right now, but two, him getting moved to one spot allows like 4 different other players to rotate around. You put him somewhere else, again, the same things can happen there that I'm not sure I'm getting that if I'm starting, say, Jack Carroll, if I'm comparing the two right now, where he kind of I see him in one specific role. It's not working amazingly. Let's finally reward a guy that's been going so hard in the VFL and playing well.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Yeah. Why am I so confident about this game?
I am. I think we can bounce back. We've been pretty depressed.
I
feel
think
like we are after a loss every time, but absolutely. Much like Sydney, I think there's enough cattle out there, and these guys, they're resilient, and they're going to be upset about that performance, probably more than us, to be honest. And I have absolute faith that they will come back out and show it all. So with that, Lockie, what do you want to see this week? Clearly it's a win. What else?
What do I want to see? I think, like, and the reason I gave him a vote in this game, I would love us to see Boyd with 6 or 7 or 8 more kicks in a game. Can we find a way to get him kicking more? Like, I know that's a very specific niche thing.
Is it literally bringing Sard in to take some pressure off him?
Maybe so. Maybe so. It just feels like, yeah, like his ball use does so much for us. Not only the skill aspect, but there's just so clearly a certain group of players in our team that are willing to, that have the confidence to take the risks at the right times. Like him, and I think like Elijah Hollins does it as well, and McGovern as well. I just want the right guys kicking. If we saw a change in that, I think that honestly puts us a long way towards getting the win.
We've been calling it out for quite a while, wanting more from him as far as just getting the ball more, because every time he gets it, he's so impressive.
Yeah.
Part of me worries that, like, is he just that player that he doesn't, and he's not going to be able to find the ball? I don't know, but I like that a lot. I think that is a great thing to see. My main one this week is just intensity in the tackle. None of these missed tackles.
Yeah.
That was one of the worst showings I've seen. That was 2018 stuff, Lockie. That was...
Yeah.
We were... Not only were we not sticking the tackle and Sydney were just brushing us off, when we finally held them, Sydney still got the ball out. It was like we just had the jumper and we spun them and they get the kick out. That almost frustrates me more. I'm like, why even tackle him then if you're not going to make sure that ball stays in? Like, it's ridiculous. So I want to see that, and I want to see it from the start. I want to see absolute intent. I want to see us really bring someone to the ground. I mean, in the first 3 seconds of this game, when Cripper, Walsh, and Hewitt in the middle have absolutely killed Matty Rowell, I want to go, okay, the boys are ready to play.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I'm definitely thinking about the midfield battle. Did you watch the Suns Cats game?
I did. They are good in Darwin.
Game.
They become. I think I messaged it to you. I said they've basically become prime bloody Brisbane Lions in the 2000s when they play up there. It's ridiculous. They're unstoppable. I mean, I know Geelong had half a team out.
Yeah.
Finally, they have half a team out, and all of a sudden the AFL media say, well, I mean, Geelong had half a team. We have half a team out, and our depth's no good. So it's interesting, the comparisons, Lockie.
It is funny what's happened to Geelong as soon as I said, you know what? They are the real deal. I respect it.
Still scored 100. I mean, ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. It was just interesting. I don't think this is going to happen, and I guess what I want to see, the meters gained from Gold Coast halfbacks was insane. Sexton, Jeffrey, and Flanders. Like, I just don't think that that's going to happen in this game. But I just do not want to see. I do not want to see that. I guess the segment isn't what do you not want to see. I don't want to see their halfbacks who, like, Flanders is good, but I'm sorry, I don't rate the other two. Like, they should not be getting whatever. Like, I think it was like 700-800 meters gained each of them. Like, that just should not be happening.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really like that. I've got two. One is a bit more important than the other, I think, and it's around our defense as far as leaking scores, Lockie, because I'm sick of it. I am absolutely sick of the amount of points against that we have right now. We have
to go back to the Timmy Dub. The Timmy Dub.
This is literally it. This is my, what do you want to see? I want the Timmy Dub special. I want the under 75 because I'm looking at the game so far this season, Lockie. And right now, there is only one game we have kept a team to under 75. I mean, very stiff. Crazy. Melbourne scored 76, wet conditions. And it was Freo who, that's their game style. Yeah. So I think that doesn't even count. So right now, we're letting teams score way too many points, 904 points against. I mean, that's more than Hawthorn's had. The only teams that have had worse than that are West Coast, Richmond, and North Melbourne right now. So clearly something is going wrong. We're leaking way too much. Let's keep it tight, boys. Let's make sure that they do not score over that beautiful 75 mark.
I love that. We're getting the dub if that happens.
Yeah. And then my last little quick one is, The last 2 times we've played Gold Coast, feels like they've got the jump on us a little bit, particularly the last time we played them. And then we had the
Yeah, they
lovely
did.
fight back, and then they threw for the first time, and maybe this was a bad move in hindsight, the Charlie Curnow back into the defense, because tell you what, us doing that with like 11 minutes to go in the third quarter against Sydney was basically, yep, we've lost the game, you idiots. What are you doing? They got the jump at us last time against Gold Coast, and we had to fight back. No, not again. I do not want to have to fight back in a game of football against the Gold Coast Suns. Don't want them to get a sniff, because they're a much better team this time around. Don't let it happen, boys. Hot from the start. Keep it tight.
Just remember when our season turned around in that beautiful game last year, mate. It's happening.
It was absolutely splendid. So let's have a look at our upcoming run of fixtures. Something we didn't do last week. So this episode is going to run a little long because we've got a few extra things to talk about. And we've been doing this in rolling threes, and we didn't get to reflect on the previous 3. So I want to do that a little bit now. We played Geelong, Collingwood, and Melbourne in that 3. We both kind of said we need to keep that closer to our ledger than the other. We need to go 2-1 at worst. I said, weirdly, we can go 1-2, but it means we basically can't lose another game out of our next 7. It puts the pressure on what you do after that. So we were unfortunately 1-2. What did you make of that, and where it kind of put things, knowing that then we played Sydney, and that game was also a loss? So it was really 1 out of 3.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't really, I don't know, there's not really much to add on it. I'm just looking back at them again,
we needed to split it.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
So it's not good. It's not good. So how do we make up for that, Lockie? Because we've now lost to Sydney. So let's look at the next 3. And this gets us to the bye as well. It almost works out better that we didn't really have that Sydney game tied to anything. Current record is 6-4. Gold Coast, Port Adelaide in Adelaide, then Essendon. What do we need from this? What is that acceptable benchmark that when we review this at the bye, we can say that we've absolutely nailed it?
Well, you know what absolutely nailing it would be, but it is 2-1 for me here. This might seem like a weird take based on the scores from last week. I think it will be completely unacceptable if we lose to this Gold Coast team at Marvel. I'll be spitting the dummy regardless of performance if we don't come away with the win.
No, I agree, because I also think that we've a big issue with what we've had right now throughout this season. I think you were saying it a lot before we started recording, is this case of it's not necessarily who you play, it's when you play them. And we've had, and I want to find the actual fixture up. So bear with me while I absolutely pad through this, because you can look at the actual fixture itself and say, okay, you probably should have beaten this team here, and who else? Doesn't matter. Some of the teams we're playing seem to be in their absolutely flying form at the time. Like, we beat Brisbane, but we didn't know they were shit yet, and they hadn't had all the injuries. Richmond, they were pretty fit at this stage, just came away with the win. North, whatever. Freo, we're on top of the ladder. Now, we lost to Adelaide and they hadn't won a game, but is that almost the worst time to face them? You can argue both ways. So I'll split the difference on that. GWS were like top of the ladder, hadn't lost a game, looking absolutely beautiful. Then we played Geelong. They were top of the ladder. They were looking perfect. And then we played Collingwood, just started to get some momentum back. Weren't at their peak, but definitely it wasn't like playing them in the first 3 rounds of the season. Then we played Melbourne. They were in some form, just knocked off Geelong, who were the informed team. Then we played Sydney, number 1 team in the comp again. Like, we're playing these guys seemingly at their peak. And now we come up against Gold Coast. They're back in the 8, couple of wins in Darwin, playing some scintillating footy. This isn't fun. I don't enjoy playing them while they're in form. However, just in isolation, I feel like this is a good time to get Gold Coast, because colder climate, Melbourne is freezing at the moment. They are not in their
We are
lovely
not losing
Darwin.
this game. We are not losing.
I just think that will affect them a little bit. And I also just think we are better, even with the injuries that we have out at the moment, plus the need to respond. I would be, and like,
we're not losing.
Touch wood, do whatever you need to. But as far as my confidence levels, I back us in so much in this game.
I'm not sure the last time I genuinely felt this confident. I am as certain we're going to win. And so from there, I think it makes sense to say that obviously we want to win every game, but Essendon somehow a second, even though I still don't rate them. And Port Adelaide in Adelaide is Sydney and Sydney-esque. So I definitely see a world where we win all three of these, but I think I'll be able to live with that'll make us 8-5 going into the bye.
And I think 8-5 is pretty decent going into the bye. We're able to bank a few wins early. It's the worst case scenario that I'm willing to accept is the 2 wins, 1 loss. And the only issue off the back of that is normally to make top 4, you basically can only afford to lose 7 games for the year, which would mean if we go in at 8-5, well, you can only then afford to lose 2, which means right now we can only afford to lose 3 more games for the year. There is a bit more of a nicer run later in the season. We do play West Coast, North, Hawthorn. We finally get some of those teams that are in the bottom half of the ladder, but knowing us, we'll probably get them when they're at their peak and they get all their players back. But no, I think get into the bye 8-5, positive ledger, put yourself in that top 8, and then reassess. But it'll be interesting to have a look at. But look, it's been a bit depressing, Lockie. It hasn't been the most fun episode. So let's liven things up with the bloody Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the ceremony of ceremonies. Straighten your tie, adjust your monocle, and raise a pinky for the Navy Blue Corner Hall of Fame. Yes, it is the Hall of Fame, one of our favorite segments on the Navy Blue Corner. Sorry, putting too much focus in making this horrific tie right now for the visual listeners. Got a bit lost in that, but the Hall of Fame is something that every single week we both get to induct something into this that caught our eye. Could be something funny, could be something to rant about. I know Lockie has made some clear disdain this year against those in the service industry. He calls them peasants. So I'm interested to see what the London hospitality is like. If anyone has unfortunately crossed his path and the path of rage, we'll wait and see. But I went big with it last week. I had, of course, the toddler that was not even toddler. He was like 18 months old, stealing the koala out of the merch store in one of the funniest robberies I've ever seen that I think any police officer just says, yeah, fair enough. You can go on with that one. And I said, Lockie, I'm going to need you because you didn't do anything with me last week. You didn't induct anything. I need you to go big this week. I've tried to put some faith in you. Do you have something to induct this week?
I do have something to induct.
Oh, that's big.
And I'm hoping that because this is something that's not only going to be hopefully inducted, but is something actionable for the listeners.
Ooh.
I think that's going to garner me some bonus points. So we've definitely spoken about this before, though, because you watched this game on TV. I think most of our listeners will have watched it and didn't head up to the SCG.
Are we going to induct the same thing? This could be incredible. This could be a double induction.
No.
This could get legend status. The first ever legend inductee.
If we ever induct the same thing, there's no way, because the actionable thing that I want to provide to our community is something that maybe a lot of people are doing this, or maybe you haven't thought of it. There is alternate broadcasts that you can listen to. Are you serious?
This is legend status, Lockie. This is our first ever double induction. Oh, this is one of the greats.
All right, you take over.
No. I need you. No. Don't you weasel your way out of this. It's all for those that have been listening and paying attention for quite some time on this podcast. The Hall of Fame is all about the spiel you give it. So I think I need to know from Lockie. Give me the sell. So the selling point and the induction speech is what the people love to hear. So I'm gonna need it from you.
It's true. It's true. And there's a few different spins on this as well. But in this game in particular, I couldn't believe how poor the television broadcast was in so many areas. I was watching the game with my partner and my housemate, and I don't know if they were feeling the passion that I was, because I was obviously very emotional for a number of reasons in this game, but I just could not believe what I was hearing. So I tried to do the old, let's just mute this bad boy and watch in silence. That lasted for about 15 seconds until the others in the room with me just, obviously couldn't take that boredom. Fire up the AFL app, bit of simulcast action with, I can't even remember what it was, maybe it was the ABC. You would not believe, people, the difference in energy, quality of discussion that you get from these radio guys. Must.
Oh, mate, I love this. This is incredible. What a week. What a week. This will turn things around. This is the luck that Carlton need, because I was going to induct SEN Sync into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's good.
I have been very fortunate this year that there has not been many games that I haven't attended. Those that I have watched on the TV have been Foxtel broadcasts. I think the only other Channel 7 one this year was probably opening round against Brisbane, I think. So it's been a long time in between drinks, but it hit halftime, and my anger levels watching the game were through the roof. It was obviously frustration around what I was watching, but I was then just I was annoyed, Sydney would break through a tackle and I'd be like, and then BT would say something, or Richo would give the worst bit of insight ever, and it would just build and build and build. And halftime hit, and I said, I've got to do something different, because I'm going to end up turning this game off out of the sake that if I don't, this TV's going. Like, I'm so frustrated with everything right now. And so I'd remembered that I'd seen on Twitter, I think it was Hutchie himself talking about this new feature of SEN, and I was like, let me see what this is all about. And oh my God, was this it was like walking out into the Garden of Eden. It was walking out into heaven. There's a bit of bliss. I was still annoyed with what I was watching, but I was no longer angry in the living room. I didn't shout at the TV. There was none of that. I was just sitting there going, okay, yeah, I don't mind this. Jared Waitley is giving some really good insight. The other fellas there are just telling the action. There's no stupid stories. There's no getting the name wrong, or, Carlton haven't had a tackle yet. They haven't had a tackle yet. Mate, we've had the ball for the whole first 15 minutes of the game. I can tell you why we haven't made it yet. Some of no one mentioning the injuries, no one having an in-depth, valid conversation was infuriating. So those that watch the games on TV that absolutely despise the commentary that you hear, oh my God, there actually is some decent commentary out there. Try whatever you want. I've tried SEN and I don't think I'll ever go back. I have thoroughly enjoyed every second of that, to the point where I listened to their after the game chatter, which normally when a game ends, I'll just turn the TV off, move on to something else. I was interested in what they actually had to say and what they were breaking it down. So big double induction, almost legend status for pretty much just hating Channel 7's coverage of the football, which I think is a win in everyone's books, but just some alternative commentary is the way to do it. Absolutely love that. But pretty much that is going to wrap up this episode. We were going to cover in this the mid-season draft. Now, the mid-season draft is happening next Wednesday night. I don't know the time. There is no information on this, but it is the 29th of May. I know that. So we will be back this time next week to chat here on the podcast about it all. So we will record a little bit of it. Might be 10 minutes, 15 minute on our own YouTube channel. If you want to watch it, Navy Blue Corner, links will be in the description on this, just because it doesn't deserve to be in this episode. There is so much that we have spoken about. It'll be in a separate one. It will also be available wherever you listen to your podcast in audio form. So make sure to follow, like, and subscribe so you don't miss anything when you hear us chat about the mid-season draft and who we could potentially pick up. Plenty of juicy stuff happening there, but that's going to wrap up this episode. The Blues will be back next week with a big win over the Gold Coast Suns. Can't wait to be back here to chat about it next week. Up the bloody baggers. See you guys next time.